Today is June 3rd, 2021. My name is Dr. Noreen Rivera. I'm interviewing Margie Longoria for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Longoria, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. The University Library Special Collections and Archives wishes to archive your interview, along with any photographs or relevant materials that you're willing to share at the UTRGV Special Collections and Archives. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate to Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Question 1, do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and any materials that you wish to donate at University Library?
Yes.
Thank you. Question 2, do you grant UTRGV, University Library Special Collections and Archives, right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Question 3, do you allow UTRGV, University Library Special Collections and Archives, to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
Question 4, do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And as you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends the form to UTRGV Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or your family members. So this will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. Which brings me to question 5 and question 6. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your pre-interview form in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV?
Yes.
Okay, and question 6. UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces may receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your consent. And with that, Margie, let me once again thank you for your time. Your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces of a Pandemic project, founded by our partners at UT Austin. The Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Project is committed to preserving the stories of Latinx and Chicanx people and those who work closely with these populations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Because you are a senior high school librarian and activist for diverse YA literature, founder of the South Texas Border Book Bash, editor of the YA anthology, Living Beyond Borders, and a self-described boy mom, who is knowledgeable of the ways this COVID pandemic has impacted your many roles as well as others in her inner circle. I know that you have many meaningful stories to share about your life during this pandemic. So with that, Margie, let's go ahead and start. And let's start by asking you to share, before we get into the pandemic proper, share a bit about yourself in terms of where you grew up, where you went to high school, and what you value about these formative years in your life.
Okay, my name is Margie Longoria. My friends everybody calls me Margie. I'm from Edinburgh, Texas, a little town here on the Rio Grande Valley border. I love being from Edinburgh. I feel very fortunate that that's the town that my family grew up in. I graduated from Edinburgh High School, so I'm a Bobcat, and I know a lot of people like to say that, you know, high school years were so ugly, and some people didn't. I had a wonderful, all of my schooling from kindergarten to 12th grade was great. I was lucky that I went to the same elementary school all 6 years, and I went to the same junior high, then I went to the same high school. And my mother was a first grade teacher at the elementary that I taught at. So I had her there for all of my little elementary life. And then junior high, I went to South Middle School. It was South Junior High at the time, and I loved it there. And then, of course, Edinburgh High School, I bleed red and blue. I loved it. Like I don't have anything bad to say about my childhood. I had a great, I had a I think back, and I had like a very whimsical time. I was very, you know, I had good friends. My parents were great. It was just I have a very fond memory of childhood. So there's that.
So a lot of stability. Mom was a school teacher. Did you have any brothers or sisters growing up?
I have a lot. We're 5. We're 3 boys and 2 girls. So but my brothers and my sister are a lot older than us. Like, it's me and my little brother. It's like my mom she had 3 older ones, and then she had the 2 little ones. That's what we are. But my oldest brother is 15 years older than me. So I always grew up, like, to this day, my brothers and my sister still treat us kind of like that we were like their babies, I guess, because we were born, they were teenagers. So we had it was nice to have and then now we have a really good, I have a really good relationship with my sister and with my brothers.
So you have that large family experience.
Yes.
That's wonderful. And so how did your love of books and reading and literacy develop in your adolescence?
My mom, like I said, is a first grade teacher. So she taught me and my cousin Jessica. We were little. Whenever my mom had me and my brother Mono, my little brother, she decided to stay home and raise us. So she didn't teach for a little while, so she stayed home. So she was able to work with us and teach us. So she taught me how to read before I went to school. So I've been reading since I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I love books. I mean, I remember reading, like, her having, we would have school. She would have school for me and my cousin Jessica, and I remember she would set up, like, had a little desk, she had a little chalkboard, and she would teach us. So we learned how to read. And my father was a big reader. My dad never really did much other than reading. I remember him always, he would watch the news. He had a couple of the TV shows he watched, but he was a reader. The newspaper, he would read the newspaper, and he would read books. And I remember being the only kids in the whole world, I thought, who didn't have an Atari, because all of my friends had Ataris. And I used to be like, Dad, like, buy us an Atari. And he would say, like, that video games would rot your brain. So he never bought us Ataris, an Atari or any kind of video game. So, and he would tell us to read a book. I was like, we're bored, read a book. So I would read, and that's what we did. And he never said no to books. Any book that I wanted, we got. The Scholastic book flyer. I was that kid who would come home and circle everything, and he would give me a check for everything in the book flyer. And Walden Books was where we would go buy books. And I was always very fortunate that they never said no to books. So I had a lot of books growing up, and that's how my love of reading came from my father and my mother, because they would, and then my mom also was going to school. She went back to get some other certification. So she would have night, she had her little study groups, and she would take us to the Edinburgh Public Library, and she would study with her group, and I would go off into the little children's section and get lost in the stacks at Edinburgh Public Library. And I loved that library. And I remember seeing the librarians and thinking they were the smartest, most beautiful women, because at the time they were all women in our library. And I was like, I want to be a librarian just like them, because I thought they were the coolest people. And that's where my love of reading came, because I grew up in the library, and because my mother and my father were big readers.
And so now here you are today, you find yourself in those librarian shoes, right? So can you share with us I guess you can say, your educational pathway for becoming a library at Mission High School in Mission?
I went to school. Okay, I have a bachelor's degree in English, because that was what I was good at, was reading books and analyzing whatever I wanted. I wasn't good at really much. I was not good at math. Science was kind of, I could do science. It didn't come easy. The only thing that ever came easy to me was books and reading, and just falling into like La La Land in my book. So I love reading. And so I have my master's my bachelor's in English. And then I decided right after that I wanted to I taught reading for a long time. I taught English for 8th grade, and I loved it. Here in Mission at Alton Junior High, I had the best experience teaching English. It was, I wouldn't have left teaching that. I wouldn't have left that job if it wasn't because I became a librarian, exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to be at Mission High School. So that's the only reason why I left teaching, because I got like my other dream job. I was just very lucky that I worked on a campus in junior high, my 8th grade, when I taught 8th grade. Everybody, I loved it. I still love that campus. I love everybody there still. Like, it was my home. It's still my home. And then here at Mission, and then I have a master's in library science and then I have a master's in English as well.
And what schools and programs did you go to acquire those degrees?
I went to Pan American University to get my my bachelor's. Sam Houston State is where I got my master's, and in library science, and my master's of English, I got it through UTB, University of Texas at Brownsville. Okay. Before we made the change. Right before we made the change, yeah.
That's right. So in terms of being a librarian, what year did you start or make that transition from 8th grade English teacher to librarian?
2011. I became a librarian at Mission High School in August of 2011, and I've been there, and I'm probably gonna die there. That's what I say. I have a big picture. It's funny because I bought this huge poster of Edward Cullen. It was a framed poster of Edward Cullen, and I had him, and I said, he's gonna go in my office library one day. And I just had him in my closet, and whenever I got my library, I took him and I hung him up, and he's there, and Edward and I we've been there 10 years, and we're gonna be there forever. I'm tired.
So yeah, you're going on your 10th year. And in these 10 years, you have accomplished quite a bit in terms of having a special investment, which we've described as activism for your ethnic community. You also see an urgency in spreading literacy and the love of reading to teens in particular. As we talked about in pre-interview, there's a love of literacy and reading in the elementary years, but then middle grade and in high school, there's a different atmosphere. So you really wanted to bring that inner energy and impact into high school and to teens across the Rio Grande Valley, as well as you've made quite a splash for promoting diverse authors and stories for teenage literary consumption. Tell me more about this activism and this drive for urgency. Where does it come from?
Okay, I remember growing up reading books, all the books. You know, my favorite books growing up were The Outsiders, Sweet Valley High. I loved Judy Blume. And I remember reading these books. I always felt a connection with the characters, because you always feel connections with these characters in the stories. And when I started teaching in 8th grade, the books that I gravitated to were the books that I loved as a kid. So I wanted to read The Outsiders with my kids, and my kids loved The Outsiders. My 8th graders, they loved them. And to this day, like I have some 8th graders that are teachers now. They're adults. I'm like, don't lie to me, but they're adults now and they're teachers now. And they're like, we read The Outsiders in my class. So I get so excited when they tell me that, because, you know, we read The Outsiders together. And so they, there's all these connections, you know, the humanity, there's all these connections in books. But I remember not seeing a lot of people of color, people that looked like us, that looked like my students in the area that we worked. So I looked and I did find some. There was Dr. Saldana, René Saldana. I remember I would read his book. He was my professor in college. So I would read his book and my kids loved it. They loved the connect, because that story kind of set mission. So they recognized Foy's Supermarket and they recognized the places. So they loved that book. So I wanted more of that. So I started looking for more, and there really wasn't a lot. I remember I would even have the kids write to Dr. Saldana and he would write back to them. And so he, and that was always fun to be able to connect with an author. Mm-hmm. And so he, I just felt that there wasn't enough. Like I felt like, where are all our stories? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I started looking for our stories and trying to figure out, like, why don't we have, you know? And then I was reading, I was researching, and apparently they said, well, it's because Mexicans don't read, and because Mexicans don't buy books, that's why there isn't enough stories, or that's why we're not being represented and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, what do you mean? So, you know, I was lucky that at the time there was kind of like a movement going on where there was other people who felt the same thing, the same way. And we had, you know, other writers like Lupita McCall and all these Mexican-American people were writing books. And those were the books. I was like, these are the books that I'm going to use. These are the books that we're going to read. And that's what we did. And I kind of felt as well that I know that in elementary schools, we're really, all the kids love to read, and they have AR, and there's all these things that motivate them to read. And in junior high and high school, it's not like that. I know in my district, we don't have AR in the high school. So the kids don't, I mean, if you're not going to give them something they don't want to read, right? And the same thing in junior high. So there wasn't a lot of motivation. So I had to try to find stories that they wanted to read, you know, and that they loved. So I came across, you know, we did the Hunger Games. They loved the Hunger Games. That was a fun book to kind of hook all of my 8th graders. And it's not an easy task to hook 100 kids, 300 kids on a book. You know, it's hard to sell. We're going to read this book and this is what we're going to read. And they're like, but I was always very lucky that I would pick a book and this is what we're going to do. And they loved it. They loved it. We read Twilight, and I remember when the year we read Twilight, I didn't read Dr. Saldana's book. And he was like, hey, like I didn't get letters from your kids. It's like, I am sorry for this, because we read about a vampire instead. It was like, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you dumped me for a vampire. But it was more to try to get these kids wanting to read. And whenever I figured out, like, that's all it is. And everybody, you know, it's not easy. It's not hard to figure out. If you give them something they want to read, they'll read whatever you want them, whatever you tell them. So I started looking for more books that were more relevant to our kids. And like I said, there wasn't a lot. So it was, and when I would find them, I started stocking my classroom library with all these books so they could have to read other than what we were reading in class. And that's kind of how it grew for me. And I kind of felt that there wasn't enough, we didn't have anything for the big kids, like book festivals. I was in library school and there was this big book festival in Houston. It was called, what was it called? Book Bash, or I'm not sure what it was called. I can't remember, but they still have it. I should remember their name. But I had to go volunteer for library school. And I remember thinking they would bust in all these kids from all over Houston to this one high school with all these writers, and amazing writers, diverse writers, all kinds of, and I was like, wow, this is so, I want to do this where I live. Yeah. And because we didn't have anything like that. And I remember thinking, like, when I was a kid if somebody would have brought Judy Blume to like my high school or to the library, or S.E. Hinton, the people that I loved, I would have died. I mean, I would probably still die if I were to see S.E. Hinton in person. But when I met Judy Blume, I was 35 years old when I met Judy Blume. And I remember crying, 35, crying, because I had loved her since I was 7 years old. You know what I mean? So it's like, I want that for the kids that where I live, for the bookworms like me. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
I got together with another crazy friend of mine who thinks crazy like me, because I thought, like, how can I do this? I mean, it's money. There's a lot of factors that go into planning something like this. And I didn't have any of it. I didn't have money. I didn't have anything. But I met up with this one bookseller who was like, I'll help you. And he did. He helped me get authors together. In 1 year, he just said, here's all these authors. And we did it. We had our first festival. And then we started, you know, after that. And then it was very important to me to have, for it to be a diverse group of people. And then I wanted people from the Valley, because we have so much talent here, writers here. And I was like, I want people from the Valley to be represented at this book festival. So then people would call me, I wrote this book, okay, come. I wrote this book, okay, come. Like, I didn't even I wanted everybody who wrote books in the Valley to come, because I wanted the kids in the Valley to see like Valley people write books, you know? And so that's how it started here. And I was very, I've been very lucky, because what I do is I travel it. I had my first one in Mission, and at Alton Junior High, at my old junior high, my old principal there, I asked her, can I have it here? And basically what I was asking is, will you pay for the light, for the security, for everything, for me to have this festival at school? And she said, so she said yes. So then I did. And that's how it started, the first one. And then the second one, I had it. So I asked the other librarians in the Valley, like, who wants to have it? So they, we had the second one in, where did we have it? I can't even remember anymore. It was Mission, then we went to FAR. Was it FAR? No. Gosh, I can't even remember. Westaco? Anyway, I would ask, who wants to have it? And they would, me. So we were moving it. And what I loved about that was that we were able to move it from this part of the Valley to Mid Valley to, you know, so that way everybody could have access to this book festival, not just us here in Mission. I wanted it for everybody, for the whole Valley. And then I'm so lucky that the Valley librarians are amazing. And we're
do you have a certain network, like a Valley Librarians network? Or, and if so, what is that? Or a loose network, or what?
Yeah, kind of like a little loose network. We have a head librarian, usually, like for all the libraries of all the districts. Mm-hmm. And then our librarian at Region 1, she, Dr. Sheneman, she was really big and a big part of because she would have her library meeting with all the librarians, and she would say, well, Margie wants to have a festival, who wants to have it? And she was able to, and that's how we were able to move it. And I've met so many wonderful people, and so many, I couldn't do it without, like, it's our festival. And that's what I always wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a festival that belongs to the librarians, the secondary librarians of the Rio Grande Valley. Because I kind of feel sometimes too that it's a lot, like I said, it's always, you know, for and not that the babies deserve it, but we lose the big kids if we don't have anything for them. So I thought it was very important to, yes, we can have stuff for the babies, but we need to have stuff for the big kids too. And you would be surprised how many bookworms are out there. Like, I remember at one festival it was in Westaco, we had Benjamin Sines. He's a really award-winning, really wonderful young adult writer. And there was one girl who came from San Marcos. She went to school. Her mom worked in Westaco or something like that. But she came all the way from San Marcos because she wanted to see Ben Sines. And because she read him in high school and she loved him. And I remember he was leaving. There was another kid that got there, and Ben had already, the festival was already over. Ben had already left, you know, and she was like, I'm here to see Ben Sines. I was like, oh my God, Ben just left. So I texted, Carolyn was with them. So I texted her, where are you guys? They were like in the parking lot driving out. So there's somebody here that she just got here and she wanted to see Ben. They turned around. He came back just to see that girl that came to see him. And that's how like wonderful this network of like authors and librarians, and Ben's Mexican American from El Paso. He's this amazing writer that people just love. And I love him. I was so touched that he did that for her. He came back, and then I remember I was talking to another one of my author friends that was there. I was like, gosh, he was like, Margie, this is so great. And I was like, I can't wait till this is so huge. And we're like, like the one in Austin. And he was like, no, Margie, you don't want to be that. He goes, look at how beautiful this is. He goes, I've been to all the big festivals in Austin and here and there. And he goes, and it's just like drive-bys. Like everybody's like, okay, say hi. Like, no, there's no intimacy. He goes, I talked to a kid for 30 minutes about basketball because I didn't have anybody else that wanted to talk to me. He wanted to talk to me about basketball. She goes, you don't get that at the big, huge ones. Like, try to keep it intimate, and this is perfect. And I was like, you're right. This is perfect. Like our little festival, our little border book bash is perfect. And it's so intimate and it's very special. And I love that we share it, like all of us share it together.
So this is something, it starts when you're getting your library, MS, and you have that, not so much, I guess, service learning project where you're going to go do this, these hours at the Houston Book Festival. And then that's when the impetus is, what can I do to organize something? Who can I partner with to bring this to South Texas? Because that's another, I guess, another alias that you go by. You're also a proud Tejana librarian.
Yes.
Right.
I am.
And so it's also about that sense of place, because going back to what you were saying earlier about seeking novels and stories for teenagers. I remember my first exposure to a Mexican American Chicano author is actually Rudy Anaya. Out in, he writes in northern New Mexico landscapes and such with Bless Mi Ultima, right? And of course, there's also Sandra Cisneros, who with her novels takes us into Southside Chicago, right? But you're looking for not only being of Mexican heritage or descent, but having that Tejano, South Texas, borderlands sense of place to communicate to the young ones, to the students, to the teens along the US-Mexico border of Texas in particular. So that's been, it seems like a driving force behind this librarian literary activism of yours.
And our book festival is very diverse. We have everybody. I mean, everybody, we invite everybody.
Of course.
But it is very important to me to have representation of the Valley, because I think that I want our kids to see that people from the Valley write books, and people from the Valley are successful at writing books. And like we have Dr. Saldana. He was one of our, like a kind of like a pioneer here in the Valley that got a publishing contract with Random House, like a big contract at the time. And it was very exciting. And he was from La Jolla, right down the street from us. So it's, and he wrote about the Rio Grande Valley. And so that's just one. I mean, we have Dave Bowles, we have a bunch, but that's just, I wanted. And Dr. Saldana comes to my book festival. He's been to like 3, I think. And because he's not here anymore.
Right. Is he up in Lubbock, I believe?
Yes, he's in Lubbock.
And what year was the inaugural book bash?
It was 5 years ago, because I remember this year, what was it? 2020, 19, 18, 17, 16, 2016. Nice. I remember this year, because of pandemic and COVID and stuff, I was like, I usually have it in October, and I was like, and October came, and I was like, oh my God, like I didn't have my book festival. It was just a crazy year last year. And so I was like, I thought to myself, like, this is year 5, like, Margie, you have to do it. So I remember just emailing everybody that I knew. I was like, I want to do this online this day. Can you do it? Do you want to? And I was so lucky, like always, like every year. I don't know why I always doubt it, that these people are wonderful. Yes. What time? What do you need? I'm there. We'll do it. So we did a virtual book festival in December, because I wanted to do, because it was year 5. And then I think it was really great that it was year 5. It was different than all the other festivals we had, because it wasn't in person. And it was just as beautiful. And then I was able to get people, like I have friends like in the UK, I have friends everywhere that I met through books. and they were able to tune in. Like so many people from all over were able to tune in because it was, and see all these wonderful writers that we had, because it was virtual, and it was awesome. I'm very grateful. Every year I'm like, oh, I just thank my lucky stars that these people, that we just have this wonderful network of authors and of librarians and of readers who are willing to just give up a couple of hours to say, like, yes, let's talk books, you know.
And did you encounter any difficulties negotiating like the time zones and scheduling and all that, or how did you troubleshoot that?
Because I'm time zone dumb. Like, so I'm like, okay, it's at 2:00. You're going at 2:00. And they're like, well, I'm in Boston. I was like, oh, I don't know what time that is. I'm in Central. Yes. So that was a couple, we did have like, and that was me, but you know, only because I don't know what I'm doing half the time. And that's another thing. Like I do everything on the fly, like on the seat of my pants. I'm like, oh, sometimes I don't know how I get it all done, because I'm like, oh, I'm just telling you, I'm very lucky. I'm a very lucky person.
So were you able to do any Zoom trainings, or was it through Zoom or another platform that you organized?
I did it on StreamYard. The night before, I have a really good friend, Caitlin Renteria. She's a Valley writer. This girl is amazing. I shouldn't call her a girl. She's not a girl. I met her when she was a girl. She wrote her first book when she was 16. And she's a published writer. She's from Hardingen. She's amazing. Now she's already getting her master's through UTRGV. She's amazing. Well, she had done some little kind of she had done something through StreamYard and asked me to be on a panel. And I was like, this is kind of cool. So then like I emailed her, hey, Caitlin, like, can you like walk me through StreamYard? Like a week before, can you walk me through StreamYard? Like, I don't know how I'm doing this. And she was like, Margie, and she coached me the night before. We had like her and a couple of friends got on and we like talked, like just so, I mean, yeah, I had to get trained. And then the next day I went on with my little links and it was great. And then I had Caitlin in the background working, like she did all my little background. So she's amazing. But yeah, it's never, we don't do any of this alone. It's through a network of friends and people passionate about books and about making sure that young people have access to all of this kind of, like all of these kind of things. Like it was amazing. I was happy when it was over, but it was great.
Especially at a time when, of course, as you know, being a librarian and also being the mother of school age sons, remote learning, right? AY academic year 2020, 2021 was the year of mass, if not total remote learning for so many students out there. So do you think that the Texas Border Book Bash had a particular impact on students who were, you know, isolated and in these situations of pandemic education?
I would like to think so. We had a bunch of kids, you know, because we had a little chat on the side. So we were able to, you know, tell the authors the little questions, ask the little questions for the kids on the side. I had a bunch of other librarians who like offer extra credit, you know, if you come to the book bash. And so I hope it did. And I know that, you know, it's kind of hard to know what kind of impact you have on anything, but I really hope it did. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. Next year, this year, I'm hoping to be in person. We'll see how it works, but that's the plan.
Because there were some perks, like you said, despite the time zones, you were able to get a global audience in some senses. So do you see yourself, either though you hope to be in person, is hybrid a possibility for future book?
I was thinking of that, because you know how we're going to probably be hybrid school. I'm thinking we're going to be hybrid school next year, like in person. And so I was thinking that would be cool. And then even like if there's some authors that I can't get in person, maybe get them online to attend that way, because that's a possibility now, because it's some, you know, it's expensive and some people might not want to travel still. Some people might still be a little bit nervous about traveling. So I would love to be able to do that. And that way we can still have a big event with everybody.
I agree. Yeah. One thing that the pandemic taught us is that we can be successful with digital to keep things moving forward, like the Texas Border Book Bash. So with that, let's go ahead and transition now to your other pandemic success, which is Living Beyond Borders, forthcoming August 2021. And this is a teen YA anthology, an edited collection by yourself of Mexican American authors. So in our pre-interview meeting, you said that this project actually had its start a few years ago before the pandemic. Can you share more about how Living Beyond Borders got its initial start?
Okay, there was once upon a time, we were living in this administration where we had a president who wasn't too, he was not very, he said some things about Mexican Americans and Mexican people that upset a lot of people. And I remember it upset me. And talking about how Mexicans were bad people. When Mexicans send their people, they don't send their best. And Mexicans are just all of that. Ugh. I remember it over and over in my news feed and seeing it everywhere. And then him like making comments about one of the Border Patrol guys having, speaking his English was very well, like very good English for a Mexican. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I just remember getting, like, it was very frustrating to me to have somebody as dumb as that man try to come at us that we're like beneath him or something. And it was so frustrating. I thought to myself, like, what can I do? I need to do something. Like, I need to fight back. And I don't know how to fight. And I was here fighting with everybody on Facebook and fighting. It's like, what do you get out of that? Just, and I get mad just thinking about it right now. And so I thought, I want to put a collection together of Mexican American stories by Mexican Americans for the world to see how beautiful our culture is, how beautiful we are as a people. Yes, I mean, I'm not going to say that we're perfect. Nobody is perfect. No culture is perfect. Nobody, but we have a lot of great people who have come, who are Mexican American, people who are Mexican. There's a lot of greatness in our culture, and you're not going to sit there and say that we're bad. So I decided, so I'm going to do. So I thought about it and I was like, okay, well, I'll just self-publish this book because, it's a book about, I was like, I didn't know what to think. I was very green, very new at this, and so I contacted a friend of mine who was an award-winning Mexican American writer. And I asked her, what do you think about this idea? And she was like, I love it. And I was like, should I do it? And she's like, you're the perfect person to do it, Margie, let's do it. So she goes, and go and ask everybody that we know and tell them that I'm on board, that I'm going to give you something and start building your list of people that can contribute to this anthology. So I was like, okay. So then I started asking people and people were saying, yes, yes, yes. And it kind of like, again, like I was, overwhelmed at how much everybody was like, yes, like let's do this. So we did. We kind of, one of my friends, again, she was in New York with her agent a couple of years ago. This started, it takes a long time to get it all done. It was in 2019 or 2018. I'm trying to think. 2018. She was with her editor, with her agent in New York. And she was just telling her agent about that because we were just talking about it. So she just happened to mention it to her agent, and her agent was like, well, I want to talk to Margie. So she was like, my agent wants to talk to you. And I remember thinking, like, agent, like that's like, I don't even, like, I know what an agent is, but I don't need an agent. I know I'm going to do this through Amazon, through what I know, and so she was like, no, you need to talk to the agent. So I did. And the agent was like, I think we should do this. And I said, I don't have a book. I just have an idea. And she was like, we can make this into a book. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know about, I was scared to death to sign with an agent, and so she was like, I can help you. So I was like, okay. So I signed on the dotted line and we fleshed out a proposal, and I asked people said yes, we went, and she sold it to Penguin Random House, to Philomel, one of the, the biggest publishers in the world. And it was kind of like, wow, and they loved the idea of it just being a Mexican American book. There wasn't ever a question like, well, let's kind of throw all Latinx in there. No, it was like, it was a Mexican American book, and that's the way. And it was, the stories that I was given by my contributors are the most beautiful. Like, I am so proud of this anthology. I don't even, sometimes I get overwhelmed thinking about like all the work that everybody, because a lot of us, we worked during pandemic. It got to the point where, because it took years, it took from my idea to when I sold it was a year. And then from a year later, whenever the cover was done, like it was just it took a while. So during this whole pandemic, we were editing this book and a lot of us were home, and I lost my cousin to COVID in July. And this is right in the middle of editing all these stories and like, you know, you as a creative person, whenever you kind of get into this ugly part, like a little bit of a depression, because something like this happens, you kind of, and then I'm on deadline. Like, I can't be depressed. I have to get this done. And then I had contributors who, you know, who also lost people. You know, one of my contributors had lost her mother right before all this stuff. So she was kind of.
And these are all losses. These are personal losses to COVID. Like your cousin.
My cousin was to COVID. Yes. My cousin passed away. She was a nurse and she contracted COVID and she passed away in July whenever it was really bad here. It was like the height of, I remember she didn't even have a room. It was ugly. And it was really hard for me to kind of like get back on track after that. And it's like, I have to get back on track. Like this is what, you know, and it was, you know, and then so I had one of my contributors had lost her mother right before it all started, right before COVID, but that was for something else. So that was hard. It was hard for her to get me something too. And I didn't want to pressure. I was like, you know what, like, we'll figure it out, you know, and we did. We all figured it out. I had one contributor who gave me a story and he was like, well, I'm gonna use this story, a little bit of the story in another book. And then my publisher was kind of like, no, we kind of want something that's not going to be anywhere else. So then how do you tell a person, like, oh no. So I went back and this man was just, he's a beautiful, beautiful person. And I told him, well, he goes, you know what, I'll just write you a whole new story. He did. He just whipped out a whole new story and gave it to me. And he's like, there's your story. And I had so many wonderful experiences with this pandemic, with this novel, with this anthology during this time. And then there was a couple of setbacks, you know, because we were in pandemic, and then trying to, like I said, edit a novel, an anthology through loss and through having my 6-year-old at the time. Oh my God, my baby is something else. And he's the one that just ran in here right now. He's just something else. And he and then he was scared. I remember him being scared because, you know, we couldn't go anywhere. Why can't we go anywhere? Because there's COVID. What's COVID? And you try to explain to a 6-year-old child, like, well, there's this ugly virus out in the world and we can't go outside because if we do, we might get sick and we might die, you know? So it's just like, how do you, so he for a long time, he barely started leaving the house. Like my baby wasn't comfortable going to HEB, wasn't comfortable going to restaurants. He wasn't, and then washing his hands. And I thought to myself, like, what have I done to my child? Because he was more like very concerned about the virus more than the rest. I mean, it's not that we weren't concerned, but we have a little bit of logic, you know, we know, like, if we go to the store, wear your mask, wash your hands. But my little one was like, he didn't want to touch bags that we brought in from stores. He didn't want, does that have COVID, Mom? I don't want, like, don't bring food from restaurant. It was really scary for a long time. And then for a long time, we didn't go anywhere. Me and my husband was the only one that left the house to go to work. And then he would come back with food and kind of like, you know, it was crazy. Like, he would leave and then come. We didn't go anywhere for months until finally we kind of, you know, started to, like, we had to live with this. We need to figure out how we're going to live with this and not just, and then I had to go back to work. So I eventually went back to work as well. And whenever I went back to work was kind of whenever I started going out, like, you know, to the store. Then I went to HEB. Then I went to, you know, because I was here with the boys and it was just us cooped up in the house. And it was kind of,
you having to balance mothering with the transition that you had to make as a librarian, on top of having this looming deadline for Beyond Borders, and having to kind of maybe crack the whip at times with regards to your authors, who of course are dealing with very personal and unique experiences to the virus wherever they were across the United States or beyond the border of the US, depending. So did you have to ask your publisher for an extension, or were you able to meet that initial deadline?
We were able to meet it. I was first of all, I would have been too scared to ask them for anything. I was so grateful that they gave me a published, like a book deal. So I wasn't gonna, I was like, they want this, I'm gonna figure out how to get it all to them when they need it. So no, and then my contributors were wonderful. Like, you know, they were like, we would back and forth, and we met our deadline.
Yeah.
And we were able to get it. And I remember thinking too, whenever we signed in 2019, and they're like, publication will be 2021. I was like, oh my God, 2021. I'm like, that's like forever, 2021. That's never gonna get here. Oh my God, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, I felt like we barely made it with everything that we needed to do. And I guess that's why they know what they're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. So the timeline was right. They knew what they were doing to get the story out the way it was supposed to go out. But I remember thinking like, oh my God, 2021 is like forever away.
And yeah, never in your wildest dreams would you have thought that a once in a century pandemic or would be the social conditions that you and your authors would have to craft and bring together this collection. Did the pandemic impact or color any of the short stories, essays, or poems in the collection?
A lot of them were already done. And then we all have to remember that these authors are also on deadlines for other books. Like, they're writers, they have other stories. Like, this was just something they were doing because as an addition to what they do as writers. You know, they gave me a short story or a poem, you know, in addition to what their regular career is. And then, you know, I have authors who have books coming out, like they've been all coming out because they've been working on these other projects in addition to this book. So that was also something that was like, oh, I'm on deadline for this. And I was like, oh my God, like, you know, they have their deadlines for their books and I have that deadline for my book. It was an experience, but it was a lot of fun. I'm so grateful that I just think of it. I sometimes I sit back and I just think like, wow, how lucky I am that it all just fell into place for me. And I think it was my friend Lupita McCall who kind of just set this spark. She's like, yes, let's do it, Margie. And we did, you know, like I haven't seen her because she doesn't live here anymore. She lives in Oregon, and I can't wait to see her again and hug her, because all of this, she set it up for me. And I remember I asked her, like, I don't even know how to repay you. And she goes, you know, when you get to where you need to be, you help the next one up, and we help. We just help each other up. You know, that's how you repay me. You know, we just help each other and build our community of Mexican writers so we can have a bigger presence in the world.
And does Guadalupe McCall, did she contribute a piece to the a poem?
And she lost her dad to COVID. So her poem, after she wrote this poem for her dad before, and then I remember it was right, she had lost her dad, and then I was like on debt. We had already turned in a bunch of stuff, and then she wanted to add something to the poem and to the she wanted to dedicate she wanted to do some stuff. And so I remember emailing my editor telling her, Lupita wants to add this, and you know, and it was like last minute, and she's like, we'll add it to make sure it gets in there, because that was special to her too. Like, you know, it was a poem she wrote for her father, and then she lost him to to COVID. During the pandemic.
Yeah. And so one thing that I did notice when I was taking a glean of the table of contents, of course, is that element that you described earlier, where these are stories that speak to Mexican-American cultural celebration, cultural pride, as well as exploration and even the history of what it is to be Mexican-American for some families, because being Mexican-American is diverse in and of itself, right? So could you speak to this celebration and exploration in history that traverses? I don't know if maybe you want to read a part of your introductory remarks at this time, if you want to, or just talk about that.
It was really important to me to, like, most of these stories that are in this anthology are works of fiction, but they're works of fiction based on true stuff, like on life. And so a lot of them are it's all a celebration of our culture and of who we are. And they're not all set on the border, because Mexicans or Americans are all over America. Right. So I made sure to embrace that and to get that into, I know it's called Living Beyond Borders, but my title came from the fact that we have, as Mexicans and as Mexican Americans, I feel that we put borders on ourselves. On ourselves, because of the way society puts borders on us, the way we're always put in this box, like you all, like they have us a stereotype, the Mexican American is a stereotype, the Mexican is a stereotype, and or like a little caricature or something, like Speedy Gonzalez or something, and it's like we're so much more than what the stereotypes have put us in. So my Living Beyond Borders meant like borders metaphorically, borders physically, borders that we put on ourselves and on each other. And so that's where it comes from. So it's not necessarily just stories from the border. It's all borders. Yes. So I was really, but I really wanted to make sure that my Texas, the Tejanos were represented in this book. And I want to say that I have 5 contributors from the Valley in the book. And then everybody else is pretty much from all over the country. But it was very important to me to have that representation from where I'm from. And so that's where the borders comes from.
And speaking to students of Mexican descent, saying, hey, don't put yourself in this box that may be inscribed for you by dominant culture, dominant society. But also speaking to maybe a white readership and readerships of different races and ethnicities, to invite them to see the diversity, and as the title of the book states, the beyond borders element of what it is to be Mexican American and part of this very beautiful and diverse ethnic culture in our country.
I was really because even with myself, I remember whenever I thought of this, I thought to myself, I'm just gonna self-publish, because I mean, that's what I thought. I'll just self-publish, and I didn't think bigger than that, or beyond that. I thought I can do this myself. I do everything myself. I could do it myself. I'll just, I thought I'll run off the copies at school and, whatever, just to get these stories out there. And it was really important to me. An anthology was important to me because as an English teacher, it was very hard to read a whole novel in class because we don't have a lot of time because of testing and because of all kinds of things in the world. And it's getting even worse now as far as like reading books. Whenever this was 15 years ago when I first started in the classroom, I could still read books. And then I had a principal who was very, very supportive. And I wanted to read this book. And she was like, read whatever you want. Like, she never put boundaries on me, my principal at my junior high. She let me read whatever I wanted. And which was, some schools aren't like that. Some schools you have to follow certain books. Some schools you have to read. Some curriculums don't allow you. Like, she let me, like, it said to read this book, but I want to read this book. Because she was like, well, you can read whatever, because I was the professional there and she trusted that I knew what I was doing. So I was very fortunate in that aspect. And some people are not. So I wanted an anthology because I felt that there's a bunch of, we can hit a short story in the class period or in a couple of class periods, and we can do a poem in the class period. So I wanted these stories for people to read and be able to get through in the class period,
right,
learn
about. We're living in and I guess you can say that in that testing centered culture of STAR test centered here in the state of Texas. And so you had that in mind with regard to the fact that some teachers and librarians might have to stick to a more strict curriculum that does not allow for the 200+ page novel. But how can they get that vitamin-packed dose of culture and meaning, and hence the anthology, where you have these shorter but nonetheless still equally meaningful works that can be communicated and digested by students, especially Mexican-American students, seeking to maybe better understand themselves in a time when the political and social environment might be a bit of a stigma for their own ethnicity.
Yes, exactly. And the fact that, you know, people from all over, like you said, all over the world can read this book and be able to relate to us as humans.
Of course.
We're all humans. We all have families. We all suffer loss. We all have happiness. We're all, you know, it's everything. And so,
and introducing those universal themes through Mexican American culture.
And we're just like everyone else. And I love that in the anthology, there's different stories. Some make you cry because they're so sad. Some make you laugh because they're so funny. Some make you, you know, sad because they're so like depressing. So, I mean, it's everything. And that's what I was so happy with, is the fact that we hit every single thing in this anthology. And I'm real excited about it. And I'm so proud of the work that we did. And I'm blessed, and I'm grateful to all my contributors, because it was a work of heart for all of us. And we're very, very proud. And I can't wait to give it to the world. I'm like excited. I'm so excited about it.
And I noticed
I was a little nervous about it because of, like, you know, what are people, but, you know, and I shouldn't care about reviews. I should know this as a book reviewer. I should not care about reviews, but it's nice whenever you put all this work and thought into something that somebody says, this is excellent. You know, I had some college professors, like, you know, that read it and tell me this is excellent. And as a student that I'm going to school to get a PhD as also. So I think to myself, like, as a PhD student, and like, this is awesome. Like that somebody that a professor in like Mexican American studies feels this book is good. So, or that it's worthy, and it's like, it's gonna, you know, it's good. And it's just very overwhelming. I've been like, my emotions are everywhere. And I guess I'm an emotional person to begin with, because I'm a creative. People are just like that. So we're everywhere. And so I've just been up and down with, since all of this, since we started getting reviews, and since we started doing like different, like a couple of weeks ago, I was able to be on a panel with Carmen Tafoya. And Carmen Tafoya is one of our trailblazers in Chicana literature. Like, oh my God, I had never met her in my life, but I've always admired her and loved her. And I was sitting next to her in a panel. After she would speak, then I would speak, and I would feel like I'm not worthy to speak after this woman, because everything she says is so, like, you know, they were printing their books and presses under, you know, and like, because publishers wouldn't print their books. So they were printing them in houses and basements and attics and like all kinds of, and I'm looking at her like, wow, you know, like she blazed the trail for somebody like me, for all of us to be able to, for Random House, for anybody to buy our books now. It's because it started with them.
And which book festival is this?
I went to so I have another lady, her name is Alda Dobbs, and she's another Mexican American who has a book coming out in September. And she is from the south side of San Antonio. She lives in Houston now, but she married somebody in the Army, so she's really been all over the world. But she's in Houston. But she wanted, and this is why I said yes. She wanted to start a book festival in the south side of San Antonio, because that's where she's from. And nobody, you know, usually they don't have the book, you know, there wasn't anything for the south side of San Antonio. She's like, I want to do a book festival. So when she told me about it, she's like, all right, would you come? And I was like, of course I'll come. Like, I love that. It's kind of like what I did. I want to start a book festival in my area because there's nothing here. And so she did that. Like, she had a little book festival, and it was amazing. She had Carmen Tafoya there. Like, I mean, hello. So it was like, so I went, it was a couple weeks ago. It was called Southside Book Festival.
And this one wasn't an in-person event.
Yes, it was. It was an in-person event, and it was pretty amazing to be able to do that. And like I said, to sit next to her and just like listen to her stories, and then for me to try to come up with something, after her, I'm like, oh God, like, like you can't, because she's our a trailblazer. She's a rock star. So that was a lot of fun. So I've been like, my emotions have been everywhere, kind of like, I still can't believe this kind of like happened to me, that we're able to do this, and that I'm able to go out, and like, how lucky am I to be able to talk to you, to talk to anybody about these stories, and to bring these stories to the world. And it's kind of overwhelming sometimes, and it's very rewarding, and it's very like, I'm a very emotional person to begin with. So it's kind of like, oh my goodness, like this is crazy.
So between the poems, and I think there's a few ghost stories in there as well. Since we're still living in an age where of immigration crisis, and students who are dreamers, are there any works in the collection that speak to immigration, or the young teen immigrant out there who might
Yes.
be?
There's a couple of poems that do speak to the immigrant. There's actually, they all do, because there's one by Guadalupe Flores. Her poem, her story is about a little girl who doesn't speak English, and she's going to school for the first time, and they're telling her, her parents are saying, if they ask you, tell them your name is Dolores. My name is Dolores. My name is Dolores. But she doesn't understand. The teacher's talking to her, and she doesn't. The story is beautiful. Like, it was. I remember whenever she sent me that story, I was like, oh my God, like I could cry. I can't. Like, this story is so amazing, and it's so perfect, and it speaks. Whenever I taught 8th grade, we had a group called the SIOP group. They're the sheltered instruction group. They're recent immigrants, and I would teach recent immigrants. It was hard to teach a person who doesn't speak English in English, and they want you to teach them in English. They're like, try not to speak too much Spanish to them, because we need them to, we need them to learn English, because the test is in English. They're going to test in English. So, it's all about the test. So here we were, and it's so hard to see their little face look at you, and they're like, I don't know what you're saying, lady. And of course you're going to try to like, okay, well, and you try to tell them, and then you go back and like, I used to let them check out books. One in English. Like, I would buy 2 books. I would buy the English version and the Spanish version, if I could, like of Twilight or Hunger Games, or those books that were popular, that there was a Spanish version. And I would tell them, let's read it in English, and then whatever you like, try, and then read it in Spanish, just so you can try to learn it or teach yourself, because it was hard for them. So when I read that story by Guadalupe Flores, I was like, this story, that's just one of the stories, but it was beautiful, because you felt what how she was scared. Not only was she nervous to be in a new school, she was scared because she had no clue what was going on. So that story is very special. But there's a bunch in that book that are wonderful. By Carolyn D. Flores, there was another one. It's called Living in the City of Ghosts. And hers is about how a lot of times Mexicans, they just pass us, like they don't see us, because we're the farm worker or the maid or everybody just goes past us. Like, it's just like no faces. And that story, when I read it, I was like, oh my God, like I was overwhelmed, and just with the stories that I got.
So making visible the invisible, her story.
Right.
Amazing. And I do recall when we spoke in our pre-interview meeting, you said that one of your reviewers, or maybe it was an English professor, will be teaching this anthology in an anti-racism course. Did you want to speak more about that, or just flesh that out a bit?
I'm going to meet with her next week. I'm going to be in this, I'm going to be in a panel in a young adult summit for the University of Nevada. What is it? It's University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Okay. So their school, they have this, the professor there, his name is Dr. Bickmore. He's like a young adult expert. And so we're going to be, I'm on this panel with 4 other writers who we're all people of color, writers of color with books coming out this year. Some of the books already come out and some are coming out, but we're on a panel together, and we've been doing a bunch of different like virtual things together. It's kind of like a little book tour group, and we're together. And so we're hoping to be able to meet up at our first in-person one in November. If it's still going to be in person, then we'll finally get to meet each other. And Alda, the one who had that book festival, is in my group. So I was able to meet her in person. That was really exciting because we had been doing so many things together virtually. To meet in person was really nice. But there's a professor there from Oklahoma State University, and she's going to use it in a anti-racism class. And I was so like in a doctoral class. Not only it was going to be in a doctoral anti-racism class. I was real excited. And she had tweeted the other day how she was reading it. I was just like, I got all excited and that she's loving it. So that made me real happy.
Wonderful. And and it, like we said, literature, it has the ability to bring together folks who wouldn't generally be found in the same room or Zoom room. And it speaks to, in your collection, the universal highs and lows and ups and downs through the subjective experiences of Mexican Americans. It's being taught in an anti-racism course, and probably will be taught in others as the future pans out. What do you say, Margie, though, to any conservative listeners? Because yes, literature is a universal, but we also in conversation, of course, I realize that we can't divorce the political from literature, and for inspiring us to speak back, to write back, to assert our voices. What do you say to folks who might say anti-racism? What do you wish to leave on the record for them?
I haven't had anybody, I guess, I don't know. I don't want to fight.
Yeah.
With anybody. I want this book to just speak for itself, because it does. It's beautiful, and it says everything that we need to say about Mexican Americans and about the beauty of our culture. And I don't want to sit here and fight with people like I've been doing. Like I had somebody say, how do we fight back? And it's like, this is how we fight back. We fight back with literature. We fight back with art. We fight back with being who we are for real, and not what they think we are, what they say we are, or what they expect us to be. Like, this is who we are. We're artists, we're mothers, we're fathers, we are good people. We're not bad people that we're being portrayed as in the media. So that's what I want for this book. And for all of us to, it's like one of my friends had said, we're going to fight back with words, because words have power. Books have power. Books are power. And we're able, instead of fighting on Facebook with, and it's ignorance. That's what we're fighting. How can you cannot fight an ignorant person, or you cannot change. You can't. So it's like, why? I'm not going to do it, and I've ignored comments about stuff, and because I don't want to get caught up in that craziness, when I just want to be caught up in the beautifulness of my culture and of our words. Like we have a lot to share. We have a lot to share. America, a lot of, we're the biggest minority group in America, the Mexican American. So you're not going to tell us we don't have a voice. You're not going to tell us we don't have power. We do. And we're here, and get used to it.
All right. Thank you, Margie. And we look forward so much to that collection that comes out on August of 2021. So let's go ahead and pivot these next set of questions, because as I mentioned in the introduction, you wear many hats. And so I wanted to, get your general understanding of COVID a bit more, and then close by segueing into you sharing stories about being a librarian in these times, and also being a mother in these times. So let me go ahead and move on to these next questions about just general understanding. When was it, Margie, that you first heard about COVID-19? Do you recall?
Gosh, we were hearing about it in the news, you know, how it wasn't here yet. And I remember I was in, it was in March. And I remember like in like December, January, starting to hear about COVID, but I never in a million years, even hearing about it, think that it was going to be what it was. Like, and I was going to, there's this huge book festival that one of my really good friends and one of my mentors, her name is Rosie Brock. She's a Dr. Brock from Sam Houston State. She was one of my professors at library school. And she also has an anthology out by young adult writers about hope. Hers is about hope, and it's a diverse collection and it's called Hope Nation. And that's another, like, whenever she did that, I thought to myself, like, you know, I want to do something like what Dr. Brock did, but like for Mexican Americans. And that's how I kind of got my idea. But she has this she's a founder of this huge book festival in North Texas called North Texas Teen Book Festival. And when I say huge, I mean huge. Like, it has thousands of kids show up, hundreds of writers. I mean, you name it, the who's who of young adult literature is at that book festival. So it's like big. And she asked me to go moderate a panel in 2020. And I was like, yes, I'm there. So I went, right? And so I flew. I remember going right before everything was already closing down. It was March. It was the beginning of March. And it was like, and I remember calling her. I'm like, are we still on? She's like, we were still on. Like, we haven't closed. And only one author had like booked it, had said she wasn't going to come. And I was like, okay. So I was like, all right. So then I'm going to get on the plane. Cause you know, I had booked my plane ticket months before. So I was like, so I remember my husband was like, I don't know if you should go. And I was like, well, it's fine. Like, they said we're still going. And so I remember going to the airport. The airports are kind of like a ghost town. There's some people wearing masks. I wasn't wearing a mask. I remember telling one of my friends, like, everybody's like, there's masks. I don't have a mask. Like, I want, like, just, it was weird. Anyway, I go to Dallas. I go to my little book festival. I mean, I'm talking about thousands of kids at this book festival and whatever, you know, we did it. Then we come home, and then like a week later, we go to spring break, and then a week later, we're not going back. It's like, what happened? It just kind of like, it was crazy. So and then after that, like, the world kind of like stopped. Like, what do we do now? And it was kind of, and then we didn't go back to school. So then how do you become a librarian during COVID, whenever your job is to give books out and your job is to have like space for kids to come in to work and this? And it was like, oh my God. So here me and my co-librarian are doing little videos, trying to do like, you know, like, okay, this is how you check out books online. And if you want a book, you know, we can't give you a physical book, but we have digital books. So here's a tutorial how to check out a digital book, and then how to go on the databases, because they still had to do research and they couldn't check out books. So here's how we do, you know, look up online, you know, reputable online articles, not on Wikipedia, not on Google, but on databases that we have for you. So there was that. And, you know, trying just to be online for teachers. Like, we're here, guys, if you need to ask a question about something, or we're here. So we made a little form. So there we were sitting, you know, working on like different tutorials and answering questions for teachers. And then my kindergartner right next to me in his little kindergarten class, like he was, you know, and then trying to teach kindergarten kids. They were all, you know, and oh, look at my this, and oh, and this, and all the, like, oh, and then my, you know, it was crazy. Like, I think back, I can laugh now, but I remember I was like, what's going on? Like, what is our world coming to? Is this going to be forever? I can't live like this. Like, I can't teach. I didn't want. I'm a people person. I'm a hugger. I'm like, I don't know how long I can do this. Like, it was crazy. And then we went back to school. The kids didn't go back to school, but me and my co-librarian, we went back. So then it was just nice to be back in school, in the library, even though we're by ourselves, but we were back and we were able to like put stuff away and clean stuff up and figure out what are we doing next year. And it was It was kind of crazy.
So March, I guess you can say post spring break, that's when the world shifts, at least here in the United States, right? Because China, of course, has been going through this since what, December, January. But here in the States, the spread has happened. And you find yourself at home with your little one being remote kindergarten teacher / putting up all of this digital content for your high school teachers, for the students, how to check out digital books. Do you remember what kind of platforms you were using, as well as like what devices you had to take home in order to pump out these, it's what sounds like dozens of short tutorial videos?
We have, we subscribe to it's a database, I guess. It's called Macinvia, and they it's just books, like you're able to, and then our Follett, we also, and see, I really, me personally as a librarian, and I shouldn't even be this way, but I don't buy a lot of digital content because I write books. Yeah. So we were lucky that we did have, I bought some, and then some of our books come with some, but we were lucky that Region 1 had bought us. We're in a cohort, or is that what they're called? Like a cohort, yeah, where we were at Region 1, and then Dr. Sheneman bought all this stuff, like all these digital resources for us. So she had, so then there we were kind of learning all the digital resources that she had bought for us that, you know, have been there. And so that's how we shared it. But it's called Macinvia. And then another great thing is that everybody started opening up their stuff, like school library journal, no, not school libraries, Junior Library Guild opened up their databases, and everybody just kind of like, let's just give these kids stuff to read. And we started opening up. And so we had a lot, there was a lot, free audiobooks, free digital books, everything was free. And it was amazing. Authors, publishers were saying, you can read books out loud to your kids and not have to worry about copyright at this time. You can do this and I have to worry copyright at this time. So it's kind of like the whole world came together and gave these kids the resources that they needed, gave the teachers the resources and parents the resources that they needed to kind of like function in this time when we couldn't go to the library, when we couldn't go to, and then to get digital stuff. Like we were checking out, like kids didn't have Chromebooks. Like I was lucky that we had, I have a computer, my husband has a computer, and the kids, my older son had a computer. Well, the baby didn't have one. Well, I had a Chromebook from school. So I was able to give my baby my Chromebook from school, but like there was parents who didn't have. So then that was another thing. We had to start figuring out how we're getting all these Chromebooks and digital devices for kids. And then there was a shortage around the world and it was a mess.
Right. So let me backtrack a bit and ask you the question. How much did your digital collection at Mission High School grow during spring of 2020, fall of 2020?
All it was after, I can't even tell you, because like I said, everything went digital. Like they were able to check out books. And so we had to, like I said, we had all these platforms open up their databases to us, and we were able, some of those databases we didn't own. Some of those databases weren't ours to, like we didn't have subscriptions to, but they were given to us because they opened them up, and then we were able to share with our students and with our faculty these different platforms. Some of them we don't have anymore. We have some still, like we still have Macinvia, and we still have, but some we don't have anymore because it was just during that time. Mm-hmm. Like this year, I thought to buy more digital books. So I did. I purchased more ebooks than I have ever purchased in my career, because I just never did, because our kids, and on my campus, we didn't have the kids, they weren't reading digital books as much as they were reading physical books. Mm-hmm. So, but because I thought, you know what, I'm just going to spend a little bit more money this year, or a little bit of money, because I really didn't spend any on it, on digital resources for them, on digital books. We do have a lot of digital resources. We have data, we have all kinds of digital resources. So that our students they've always had, even before pandemic, even before COVID.
But the digital books.
Yeah. Because a lot of kids don't have devices. Like not everybody has a Kindle. Not everybody has. So, but we were learning, you can read from your phone. We got a Chromebook for every kid. So they were able to read off the Chromebooks. So it took a lot of like just crazy thought from everybody to kind of, and then all the librarians kind of got together, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Everybody's sharing ideas. I was learning from librarians. Like I have librarian friends all over the state, all over, so what are you guys doing? I have some very techy, I'm lucky that I have some very techy librarian friends, because I'm not a very techy librarian. I'm a book librarian. Like I'm all about books and I love books, and I'm not so much of a tech person. So I was lucky that I have tech friends who are like, I'm like, what are you doing? Show me. How do I make a video? How do I do a tutorial TikTok? Like, I mean, crazy things that we were doing to try to get these kids to get online and read,
Speaking to them on those modes, like you said, TikTok, those modes of communication and ingestion, that it is part of that Gen Z, I guess you can.
Our emojis everywhere, and like.
Right. And as you were saying, you also, as a librarian, were responsible, you and your staff were responsible for getting out those Chromebooks. Did you also do Kindles as well, or was it Chrome? That was the
just Chromebooks.
hardware.
We just did Chromebooks. The younger kids got tablets, but then they weren't, like in the district, the younger ones got tablets, but most of the kids in our district got Chromebooks.
And were those sent via mail, or was it kind of like a pickup
Kids
session?
were picking them up.
Mm.
They were picking them up, and this is like right at the end of last year, the craziness. Towards like whenever we went back for the new school year, we had, it was a little bit better. Like every kid got a Chromebook. Every kid who needed a hotspot had a hotspot. So that was also nice, because some kids didn't have internet access. So it was difficult, because even with my little one, everybody had to learn Google Classroom in 5 seconds. Like, okay, now we have to learn how to do Google Classroom. I felt bad for teachers, because like I said, I'm not very techie, but I can learn. I know how to do it. I'm not a big fan of it, but I can do it. I can just imagine those teachers who like the older teachers, the generation before us, that don't want anything to do with it. I barely want anything to do with technology. So there's generations above us who don't want anything to do with it. So how they had to transition, it was difficult. And then and it's funny how some of these people are better that, like, everybody's now a whiz at Google Classroom, which is great, because we couldn't have survived. And then Google Classroom too, this platform that nobody ever, it was there and we used it for little things here and there. All of a sudden it became like what everybody used to teach, like, and it was free. Like, wow, it was there for us. Like, who knew? Like, it was there for us and it was free. It wasn't like Zoom.
Were you all as librarians able to use Google Classroom for orientations or anything that you all did over the fall 2020, spring 2021 semester?
Yes, we did do Google Classroom for orientation with our freshmen. And then we at my school, we have a library class where I have like library aides, and in real life they come in and they're the ones who really like clean our library. They put our shelves, they put our books away for us. They make sure the chairs are pushed in. They're like our helpers, our library helpers. So there's a lot for them to do during the day, but whenever you're not at school, what do you do when I have to, oh my God, so we had like a little digital classroom for them, a Google Classroom for them, where we were doing poems, and they probably hated me. It's like, we're going to analyze this poem today, guys, because what could I do with them? It was fun though.
Okay, so even the librarian, the student helpers were able to have some productive time in the space of Google Classroom for their library aid period, I guess you can say. So you buy more digital books this go around. Also talk about as you guys make the transition to come back into the classroom in the fall, what have you been using your budget for sanitation purposes?
Well, I was able to get to me and my coworker. Well, because in the very beginning, we didn't know, like, we were like, how long does COVID live on paper? How long does COVID live on cardboard? Like, we were so scared, like, we didn't know at the very beginning. So now we kind of know how COVID, how it dies off on certain times. So the American Library Association was they're kind of like our mothership. And they were saying, leave everything alone for 72 hours. And then you need to you can't spray books with a sanitizer spray, you know, so they were kind of saying UV lights and then this and I mean, there was all kinds of stuff. So in addition to leaving our books for 72 hours, we bought these huge, and they look like a big Zach Morris phone, like those big phones from like the 80s. That's exactly what it looks like. And it's a UV light, and we would sanitize the book after we left it for 72 hours. And then we sanitize, and then we would do this with gloves because we didn't know, like we were too scared to. And these things cost us like $500 each, and there's 2 of us. So we got them, like we were like, well, we need them. And our principal said, yes, we need them, like, because we didn't know. Everything was so like, what are we doing here in this crazy time? So we were lucky that our administration just said, yes, if you need it, you need it, like, let's get it, and gloves and, you know, wipes and all that kind of stuff. So that big, huge sanitizer was probably like our most expensive, like but no, when we use them, I mean, we're supposed to use them. So we're still using it because we don't know yet when we stop. Right. And then apparently it kills everything. So we still have flu. But you know, we don't have a lot of kids on campus right now. But we do have stuff coming in still. So,
and then of course, come September, October of this year, 2021, do you see yourself using some of that hardware? Is you get?
I think we better be seen using it because we spent so much money on it. They were crazy,
right?
But we did.
Okay, let's see. So that and. One element that I do want to address before we do sign off, if you'd like to talk a bit about what you're one of your major resources, your mother, in these times of being editor, a librarian, as well as the many other roles in your professional life. How has this pandemic impacted your mother and the pivotal role that she plays in your family that helps keep all the wheels in motion?
Like I said, I'm just a very blessed human being. My mother I built a house in the front, and then I built my mom a house in the back. So we live together, but not together. So like when I'm like, yeah, mom, go home. Like I've had enough of you. She can go to her house or I can go to my house. But my boys have the best of both worlds because they have me and they have my mom. And my mother, I couldn't do anything without her. Everything that I do is because of my mother. Like me getting 3 degrees up to now is because of my mother. I'm working on 2 more degrees. And the only reason I can do that is because of my mother. I'm doing this interview right now because I tell my mom, I'm going to be busy, you know, she feeds them. She ran my older one to get his second COVID shot today because my 15-year-old got his other, because I was going to be doing this. So he needed from school, he needed to go over there. So she, you know, like and this is always like, my mother's always been, I wanted to go away to school after my father passed away. I was like in this crazy place in my life because I was very young when my dad passed away. I was like 21. That was young I feel that's young. And I wanted to leave this place. I wanted to go away because I was not feeling it here. So she was like, okay, go away. And so I've just been my mother, I couldn't do anything without her. So she's my angel, like my angel mom. And during this pandemic, and she was the first person, like whenever it was like to get back, and they were saying the older you are, my mother's 79 years old. You wouldn't know. She still climbs up on the jungle gym with my 7-year-old. We get mad at her because she'll be like on the ladder trying. I'm like, mother, you cannot be on the ladder when nobody's around. Like, and she's a tiny little person. She's this tiny little person, my mom. But she's never, I think, and the reason she stays so limber is because she never sits still. And my mother was a migrant farm worker who decided that she didn't want to be a migrant farm worker anymore. And she taught herself English, the only one in her family that went to college, graduated from college and raised a family. And then all of us, she instilled that in us that we had to go, we didn't have a choice. We had to go to college, all of us. So all of us have a degree, but some of, others, I have more than, I went on for a little bit more, but everybody else has, one, because that just wasn't an option in our family. Both my parents are college graduates. So she's just I mean, when you think of like chingona, that's my mom. Like she is the ultimate chingona. Like she's everything to me, and she does everything for me and for my boys. And they're very lucky that they're able to still have their grandma, and that she's in good health, and that she's able to be here with them.
Mm-hmm. And in pandemic times, I suppose you say she lives in the back of, you have a house for her on your property. So I would assume that means then that she didn't experience some of the effects that other members of the elderly community did, in terms of feeling isolated or having to quarantine from their grandchildren, never seeing their grandchildren, because of your family dynamic. It's quite the opposite. Pandemic, she was able to continue to see her grandsons. In your family, was she able to see the other grandchildren as well, or?
No. Okay. It was just us until we didn't see my sister for a while. My sister has my sister's the one with kids here. My other brothers and sisters, I have one nephew, my oldest nephew, he's in Alaska. He's in the Air Force in Alaska. And then my niece, she's in Houston. So we didn't see them. And then my other two brothers, they don't have kids. And then my sister has her two kids. But when is the first time I saw my sister? I didn't see my sister for months. I want to say till after we got vaccinated that we were able to that we felt safe, because you never know. And so yeah, it was just us. And then the first person I got back, like whenever they started having these vaccines, my mother, when they called from, it's like, I want my mother needs to get vaccinated first, and then the rest of us. So we got that one shot from my mom, and then we were able to finally get shots for the rest of us. But like, I was like, she needs to be the first one here, because she was the most vulnerable, I thought, to be. And then try to tell a 79-year-old woman she can't go to HEB, that she can't do this, she can't do that. Say, Mom, and I lived through this, and I'm like, oh my God, mother, whatever. Like, you cannot go to HEB. Like, what do you need? And Eli will get it for you on the way home from work, because she was like, stubborn. She's a stubborn woman. So that's where I get it from.
So much of the COVID precautions that your family took were in part to protect your elderly mother and your son's grandmother from the impacts of the potentially deadly impacts of the virus. Yeah. And so once she was vaccinated, like you said, that opened up to seeing her other family members and grandchildren. Were holidays celebrated differently for you all then, in that case? In the 2020 Thanksgiving, 2020 Christmas, New Year's?
We did it all here, just us. It's usually at my sister's house, Thanksgiving and Christmas. But this year, no, like it was just us. And it was okay. Like, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Like, to me, it was like, you know what? If we can sacrifice this Christmas, this Thanksgiving, we can have all the rest of our Christmases and Thanksgiving. That's how I thought about it all the time. Summer, like we usually do a lot of things in the summer, and it's like, if we can just, Margie, if you can just sit home this summer, because I remember I was like, I'm not getting my husband, like, you're canceling all your plans. We had all these plans to go here, to go there, cancel them all. I was like, I'm not canceling anything. And then like, okay, fine. So I thought, okay, just to give everybody peace of mind, if we cancel this summer, then we'll have next summer and all the summers after that, because we had to like kill this virus or this. So we did. Like, I feel my family, we did our part. We did what we were supposed to do, and we're all vaccinated now, and just the little one's not, because there's not a vaccine for him. But as soon as there's a vaccine for him, boom, he's gonna get it, because it's just, there's no reason for us to not be vaccinated and just to try to get on. I know, and I really, everybody talks about getting back to a normal. The normal before, it was kind of a crazy normal. I'm never home. I'm a very busybody. I have my sons in this, and we're in everything. If they're not doing something, I'm doing something. We were never home. And I learned that to be home, that it's okay. The other day, it was a couple of Saturdays ago, I woke up, it was a Saturday, there was nothing to do. I didn't have a football game to run to. I didn't have, like, I thought to myself, wow, like, I'm just going to sit here, read my book and drink my coffee because this is a Saturday that I have nothing to do. And it's never really like that in my family before this pandemic, because we were always, me especially, going here, going there. And if it weren't for my mom, like I said, I wouldn't be able to go to book festivals. I wouldn't be able, like, I have a bunch of friends in the romance book community, and I travel a lot to do romance book stuff because some of my best friends are best-selling New York or best-selling romance writers. And when they come, we go to book festivals, like book signings and stuff. And I go out, I help them. I'm like their assistant, and that's not a place for kids. So like I take off on a weekend, on a Friday, and my mom will watch my boys while I go and do my, I'm just very, and I'm always doing something. So this pandemic taught me how to just take it easy. Like, just try to take it easy. Like, I don't have to be everywhere. I don't have to save the world, or I guess before I thought I did, I don't know, but I was always just like, I can only do so much, So it did teach me to slow down a little bit. And I'm kind of grateful for that. To spend more time with my boys. Like, I always want to do something. I was like, I'm going to get a job this summer. My mom's like, no, you're not. You're not getting a job. Like every summer I'm getting a job. She's like, nope, you work all year. Then summertime is for you, and you need to be with your boys. So I am. I feel myself with my boys.
Right. And then one of the final questions, you mentioned that your 15-year-old recently got his second vaccine. The 6-year-old, how are you planning to negotiate things while you and many other mothers across the country wait for their younger children to become eligible for a vaccine? Are there any lingering precautions you all will take in the coming months?
I'm not sure if I'm sending the little one back in person before he gets a shot. He might stay with my mom next year. So until we get him a shot, my big one's going to go to school because he has his shot. So, but my little one, I'm not sure if I want to send him yet. And I know that everybody else around the adults, most of the adults are vaccinated, but I don't know. I just feel I don't think it's going to hurt anymore if I keep him just home a little bit longer until he gets his vaccine, and then send him out when I know that he has some kind of protection.
Are you thinking homeschooling, or is Mission CISD offering a remote option continuing into the fall?
I'm not sure that I'm pretty sure that we're doing they're going to go in school, in person, and they're going to have to offer people, like, there'll be some kids, there'll be some parents who won't want to send their kids. I'm not the only parent. I'm not the only crazy parent who's not going to want to send their kid back to school next year. Not yet. So I'm thinking that they will. If not, well, then I'll send him somewhere else. Or my mother can. Yeah. There's another school that I'm looking at, like a private school, that I'm thinking the classroom sizes are smaller, and I might send him there because it's smaller instead of like a bigger, like a big school.
Yeah. So
we're still looking at different things for the little one because I don't, and plus he's very cautious. He's like, he didn't want to go back to school. Whenever they let the kids go back to school this year, you would think most kids would want to go back to school to their friends. He was like, no, I don't want to go back to school. Like, I don't want to go get COVID. That's what he would say. I don't want to go get COVID. So it's like, okay. So he doesn't want to go get COVID.
So it sounds like your family is being pretty attentive to the news and to the ongoing evolution of the virus and of vaccines and of even variants, still all in flux right now, all in flux.
It's crazy. I don't know when we're ever going to get back to a normal, if it's ever going to be normal again, or what we knew before.
Right. But your family, like so many others, and especially as you said, you and your mom being the go-getters you are, you're finding ways to adapt and still bring forth those successes of pre-pandemic times till now. Margie, is there any other experiences or stories that you would like to share before we close today?
No, thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Margie Longoria. It was a pleasure to discuss with you all of your many successes as an editor, librarian, mother, and all around literary activist looking out for our YA and teen youth and their reading needs in times of and of course, evolving pandemic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.